Previewing Oregon, Ohio State with James Crepea of the Oregonian coming up on College Football Smothered and Covered.
You are Locked On College Football Smothered and Covered with your host, Barrett Sallee. Your one-stop shop for everything college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, thank you for making this your first listen every single day. I really appreciate all you guys and what you've done for the show since we brought it back in February. So thank you for making this your first listen. Of course, hit that notification bell, subscribe, all that stuff. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets from FanDuel. That's right, $5 gets you $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. James Crepea, the Oregonian. Hey, you know what, man? It's been a long time since you lived in our neck of the woods.
It has.
And now we get to talk about a national game that I don't know if anybody thought would be a 2-3 game. Yet here we are. How are you, my friend?
Doing well. Yes, it's been a while, Barrett, since I was in the southeastern part of the country. Really, since the 2022 season opener. With Oregon and Georgia, but it's good to be back chatting with folks in the neck of the woods that I kind of carved my teeth there before coming out here, and good to touch base with you again as always.
Yeah, so Greg Sankey's not here to take all your peppering of questions. For those who don't know, James in spring meetings in Destin every single year, peppering Greg with questions. It was awesome.
I enjoyed it as well. I'm sure he doesn't miss me. I do get to see and cross paths with him every once in a while. It'll probably be in December at the Sports Business Journal's get together as always. But I actually intend to be reaching out to him this week, given the meting between the.
I was going to say there's stuff going on, right?
Yes, there are a few things off the football field taking place. So I actually do intend to reach out to Herb in order to touch base with Greg and renew acquaintances. But that aside, no, it was always a lot of fun. I know it certainly entertained everybody else in the room.
Yes, it did.
At the time, no doubt. But it was always part of the job, and a part of it that I did enjoy. And I know it actually in his heart of hearts that Greg did too, because it was always I think a professional jousting of the minds at times on whatever the issues of the time were.
And Auburn's still not in the SEC East because we've seen.
Yeah, still not in the East. Yeah, still haven't gotten there. Still haven't happened. Yeah.
Still not in the East. Never seemed to happen. All right, so what is happening this weekend before all of the SEC Big Ten talk and whatever happens off the field? There's a pretty big game in your neck of the woods. I think a lot of us thought Ohio State, Oregon was going to be huge, and it turns out it is. Surprise, surprise. Oregon's been one of those very kind of confusing teams, though. After what happened the first couple of weeks, and it hasn't really taken hold in terms of what exactly Dan Lanning wants it to be. So how have you seen this team evolve from Idaho, Boise State to where they are right now?
So on a couple of fronts, offensively, most certainly, look, I mean, the offensive line play the first couple of weeks was scattered, to say the least, and a little bit of a yo-yo act, to say the least, in part brought on due to injury, and the injury situation didn't improve. They just kept shuffling, and in the Boise game in particular, I mean, they played 4 different lineups and made 11 changes without an injury, and that's hard to do over 57 plays. So they really were just throwing anything against the wall that week to see what could stick, to see what kind of continuity that they could get by way of performance in particular. One of those lineups clearly shined through because they've stuck with it since, and it's worked out nicely. And it was more or less the lineup that they were expecting to be the starting lineup this season. I say more or less because Matthew Bedford is the injury, the Indiana transfer who re-aggravated an injury, so he's still out. That was the one caveat, the one exception where they would have expected him to be at right guard, Marcus Harper to stay at left. But outside of that, they expected Iapani Laulu, nicknamed Pancho, who you hear a lot about on these telecasts now, to be the starting center. And he spent all of spring in that capacity. Started the Fiesta Bowl in that capacity because Jackson Powers Johnson opted out of the game. And throughout the spring and throughout fall camp, he was at center. But we knew 2 things. By his own admission, both before the Fiesta Bowl, after, and all of spring, this was a player who said, look, I didn't play center in high school. I'm not used to snapping. And it's an area that is a weakness for me, and I have to get better. And he was forthright about it. So that's one. Then we see in the spring game, the lone opportunity we get to see actual football in the spring, the snaps are not very good. Yeah. There were problems between him and Dillon Gabriel, and you saw that in the spring game. All right, then you hear in the offseason from Gabriel in particular that, okay, yeah, now they're working more together in the players-led practices throughout the summer. They're ironing some things out. Things are getting worked out. But as fall camp kept going, the issue would not go away. The topic was not being put to bed. And then all of a sudden we're seeing the second teamer, who was a walk-on in terms of that practice and has been for the last couple of years, Charlie Pickard, taking first-team reps. And it became, oh, this isn't just like something they're doing. No, this is really going to happen. And it did the first couple of weeks. And it's easy to point fingers and blame and say, oh, it was bad because of that. It wasn't simply that. It was right. More to it than that. But ultimately, they've settled some things down there. That's helped the O-line, which in turn, better protection, not allowing pass rush, albeit against some inferior opponents in the last few games since. But no pressures allowed is no pressures allowed. So that's helped. That's carved out some things in the run game. That's protected Gabriel better. That's allowed the passing game to get better out there. So that's how the offense has kind of come into form and found its identity the last few weeks in particular. Defensively, they've been good from the jump.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Ashton Genty hit a couple of runs and he ended up having a big night. But that
happens.
That happens. And that's going to continue to happen to pretty much everybody that they play as long as he's standing upright. That stands the test of time, first off. Second off, he hit 4 runs and one was a 70-plus yarder. Oh, yeah, he hit him. But on 20-plus carries, they still limited him for the gross majority of the night. The 4 big ones, oh, yeah, that's part of it too. You don't just say, well, you were good except for what you were bad at. No, that happened. But on the majority.
Save that talk for Hugh Freeze.
Yeah. Please don't bring me back, Barrett, to that.
I'm not.
Don't bring me back into the vortex.
Stay out of the Pacific Coast. I'm sorry.
Yes, but no, ultimately, look, outside of that, the defense has performed well, and both collectively and individually. And yes, it is even Boise. Genty aside, 5 lesser or inferior opponents then, less talented teams then. But this secondary got overhauled in the offseason. They've played well. The linebacking core has played the best that it has in years. And then defensive line-wise, a player from your neck of the woods previously, Jordan Birch, who was already here a year ago and was a disruptive player a year ago, but just didn't have the sack number to back it up, is now delivering the sacks, along with additional players that they added in the offseason to bolster the defensive line that lost. It went from the most experienced and oldest group in the country to a reshaped group, but added a Derek Harmon from Michigan State, added a Jamari Caldwell from Houston, and had freshmen become sophomores who are now physically more imposing players. And you throw that all together, and now you have not just a top 20 defense in a lot of categories, but even better than that, bordering on elite. We have to see it against the likes of an Ohio State offense to know and validate exactly how good this defense is. But like I say, they've been good from the jump. They could potentially be great.
And that's where I kind of wanted to go next. We'll talk about the offense and Dillon Gabriel in a minute, but defensively, we all, Dan Lanning. I've been around Dan Lanning for a long time too, being down here. He knows how to build from the inside out. And he said when he got the job, hey, that's what we're going to do here. And that's kind of what Cristobal was doing too. Mm-hmm. But do you feel like this is that the vision of where a defense needs to be has been matched by Lanning? Or do you feel like there's still more to grow? And not just in terms of this year, but maybe beyond in terms of bringing depth next year and the year beyond?
Yeah, I think they're certainly the closest that they've been in the 3 seasons under Dan to getting to that point. Again, the entire starting secondary nearly the entire starting secondary is transfers. Either transfers this past offseason or transfers from 2 years ago. That's Jabbar Muhammad via Washington in the offseason. That's Nico Reed a year before, transfer from Colorado. That's Kobe Savage, transfer from Kansas State this offseason. That's Tysheem Johnson, transfer from Ole Miss the offseason before that. And transfer at nickel and Brandon Johnson from Duke in the offseason. So how do you overhaul an area that was weak and that was thin before? Well, yeah, that's how they've done it.
That's how you do it.
That'll work. Linebacker, they have one in Justin Jacobs from, again, a year before in terms of transfer. But that's been built a little bit more organically. And there's 3 freshmen who barely got a chance to see the field just yet. So that room is getting and gearing younger, even though it's senior laden at the moment. And then defensive line, again, they inherited a veteran group. And Brandon Dorlus does play for the Falcons and, did get drafted, et cetera. And they had a couple other guys be UDFAs who made the league. But this group, with the transfers who I mentioned before, has a higher end ceiling, both with Birch and the players that they've added, combined with, yes, a lot of youth also, to where that group and what that'll succeed and become in the years ahead. I think the secondary is the one area that if you had to say, what do they still have to build towards? Where is there still growth, not only for the rest of this season? They've seen progress relative to a year ago at the CB2 spot, but where could they get to in the long run, and where they're building to, particularly at the corner position, with a lot of younger players just aren't playing right now, is at the corner spot. Because you can have one elite corner, and they have. 2 years ago, it was Christian Gonzalez, and he's a first-round pick. Last year, it was Kyrie Jackson, and he was a mid-round pick. Now they've got Muhammad, probably projects as a mid-rounder in part because of his height, even though he's playing as one of the best corners in the Big Ten, if not the country. But again, at 5'10", he probably translates to a nickel corner in the league, and you're probably looking at third round at the high end in terms of projectability. But regardless, a very good outside corner at this level. But that other corner spot, and this is where this week matters, when you're playing the likes of an Ohio State offense, but not just in the season, maybe a second time in a Big Ten title game, maybe a third time in the playoff, or an elite offense, the likes of, whether we're talking LSU 19, Bama 20, when you're going to go up against, and not just one, multiple in a playoff run in this 12-team playoff, you need more than CB1 to be elite. And that's the area where they're better than they were, but do they have two dudes at the corner spot? We'll find out a lot more on Saturday. I don't think they have two, first, second round dudes. And that's where they could still get to that point where, like I say, if you're going to win 2 or 3 games in a playoff run, you probably need that.
Yeah, you need somebody to shut down Jeremiah Smith, which I don't know if that's possible right now. It's pretty ridiculous. So to me, I think if Oregon's going to win this game, it's going to be on Gabriel. I know that's kind of lame analysis. Hey, it's on the quarterback, but it is. And despite all the issues, especially in the offensive line early in the season, Dillon Gabriel's been awesome. And I think he obviously is going to have to play the best game of his career, but what do you think he needs to do? What is the biggest X factor for Dillon in terms of getting into a track meet and winning in what will be the biggest game in Autzen in generation?
No,
maybe ever.
For Autzon's purposes, it will be the biggest ever. It's the first top 5 matchup in the building's history. So for that perspective, as far as home games go, it doesn't get any bigger in program history. Now you could argue about stakes and those things, but the stakes are awfully big too.
Right, exactly.
So rankings it is, and I would say stakes also will probably stand the test as well. What does he have to do? Well, he has to not throw a red zone interception as he has the last couple of weeks, which by his own admission, he was forcing some things, and he was. And he has to not do that. That's for sure. They cannot take points off the board when they're there. Start with that. And that comes with staying on schedule. And I don't mean just offensively on schedule. I mean his throwing schedule. They made a point in the telecast on Friday night with Michigan State talking about getting the ball out in 2.5 seconds and when he does versus when he doesn't and those things. He has to stay on schedule and on rhythm of his passing. Make the quick, decisive decision. And if it's not there, eat it and throw it into the third row and be done with it and live to fight another day, particularly in the red zone. But don't force it. You could get away with forcing it in the American. You could, except against Cincinnati a couple times. At the time that he was there, you could get away with forcing it in the Big 12, largely, outside of maybe when he was playing Texas.
Sure,
cannot get away with forcing it against Michigan State's number 1 corner. Cannot get away with forcing it when one of your receivers falls down. Can't do that.
Yeah.
So you got to stay rhythmically and timing wise on schedule. That's first and foremost. Second, as you say, potentially a track meet. Barrett, I don't think with the way either one of these defenses is playing, you get the number 1 defense in the country on paper in Ohio State, and I think it's more than a paper tiger. I think they probably are an elite unit, quite frankly, in sheer volume of talent. And I think this Oregon defense is awfully good in its own right. I would be stunned if both of these teams get in the 30s, to be honest. If it is a track meet, I think it's going to be a little bit lower. So with that, because case in point, how are you going to get there? It's probably going to be explosive plays. Ohio State hasn't allowed a pass of 30-plus yards.
Yeah.
Now, and that's just talking about air time. That's saying, so you mean to tell me when they're up by 40-plus on the 3 MAC teams that nobody broke a tackle? Nobody got an extra 5 or 8 yards to turn a 18-yard gain into 28 into 32? Nope. So they have to, the proverbial coach speak of take what you can get, take what they're given. Not just that. look, when you have the opportunity to hit a Tez Johnson or Evan Stewart in a weak spot in the zone and then let them create some plays in space, take it. Mm-hmm. Don't just rely on throwing the ball. This fan base more than any. Boy, do they obsess about air yards, and they love looking at a pretty football fly very, very far. Against this secondary and against this safety core, I would not obsess about that. I wouldn't count on that. They have hit big plays when they put safeties in conflict, both in the run and the pass. I don't think they're going to be able to do that very much against this Ohio State defense. So that's where I say taking what you can get and what you're being given, and then let the playmakers go and do it. And Dillon's talked about this before. Like, this is hardly a revelation. But in terms of what he has to do in this game specifically, staying on schedule in his throw, and then when things are there to be taken, just take what you can get. And look, this may have to be a grinding kind of game in terms of duration of drives. You might have more scoring drives have to be in the 8 to 12 play range than you might ordinarily have in the season. And that's just going to be how it is against this Ohio State defense. Because like I say, they're not allowing big plays. You can't count on that. If that's your game plan, that's a tough way to make hay against this Seminoles defense.
This game's been pointed to a lot since the Big Ten schedule came out. What was that? Almost 6, 7, 8 months ago, whatever it was. Oregon fans had to be excited about the move. But when they saw this, I would imagine eyes just got incredibly wide. What's it been like as they've sort of navigated through the last, 5, 6 months into the first month of the season? What's the feeling now that they're Big Ten and they have that patch on their jersey?
Oh, this was largely seen by a pretty good swath of the fan base as an eventuality. Mm-hmm. Whether the Pac-12 was able to cobble something together and hold on in the 11th hour or not, all right, it would have been a rights deal for however many more years, but eventually this is where Oregon and Washington were going to end up. And I think a pretty significant number of the fans and a portion of the fan base really felt that, knew that, and wanted that to be as fast as possible rather than delaying the inevitable. That's first and foremost. So excited about all the possibilities, excited about these kinds of matchups, particularly home games in terms of football. And then to say nothing of, hey, in basketball, the relative quality of matchups and what those tickets are going to be going for, and the demand for some of those games and the caliber of those games is going to go up also by a big, big magnitude. So the excitement's been there. For this one specifically, not just because obviously the expectations of what both of these teams are going to be this year, but you got to remember, this was a matchup that was supposed to happen in 2020. And Correct. The Oregon home schedule in 20, believe me, just ask anybody in the athletic department. They will still bemoan what was lost in terms of the magnitude of opponent. That was probably going to be the greatest home schedule the school had ever seen, because they had North Dakota State and Ohio State and Hawaii at home that year. Mm-hmm. And obviously that didn't, and Washington also for that matter. So those things did not end up coming to fruition, obviously, but it was a matchup that was lost, as many were. And then they had the non-conference rescheduling, and I believe it was 2032 and 33. So, mark your calendar accordingly. Now, of course, exactly, it's scrapped and what have you, and now it's part of conference play. But this was the kind of matchup that, like, it was years in the making, that they were looking forward to the return trip that just wasn't to be had. And now you get it, and it is for conference play, and it is for the driver's seat in the race to get to Indianapolis and get back there from media days to conference title game, and have an opportunity to play for that. And so the stakes obviously are significant for this week, all those things that it means. But in the big picture of hosting Ohio State as the first major Big Ten opponent where there's big stakes and a ranking and those things, like I say, this was the kind of matchup that this fan base was yearning for and looking forward to from 4 years ago. And it was just one of those games that got lost amid the COVID season.
You think they get the job done this weekend?
Had you asked me this question back in June and July, I would have said yes. And I think obviously the odds makers felt that way, or it was close to a toss-up / Oregon was just barely favored. A combination of things, a combination of how they started the year, including on the O-line. Yeah, they may have fixed some things against Oregon State and UCLA and Michigan State.
Right.
That is not Jack Sawyer and JTT
Sure.
and Williams on the inside, that, against the number one defense, not only statistically and on paper, but a front that even Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia say is an NFL front. Okay. And is that it's generating more pressure with 4 than anyone in the country. Okay. So that's one area of some concern, no matter what they may have done against their last 3 opponents. Combined with, look, Jeremiah Smith is he's as advertised.
Impossible to cover.
Yeah. And, again, Jabbar Muhammad can only cover one guy at a time. And while they have done better and they have fared better collectively and as a secondary than they did a year ago, they have not faced the test anywhere near this, not even close.
Yeah.
And the CB2 position may be better than a year ago, although some of the players who were playing the most were guys who were here a year ago. And they were guys who everybody got lit up by Washington in this secondary, other than Kyrie Jackson. But they did get lit up by NFL receivers and a first-round quarterback, but they got lit up. Well, they got an NFL quarterback and they got NFL receivers, and until we see them deliver for 60 minutes against this kind of receiving core, it's hard to go into it. I don't care where they're playing the game. It's hard to go into it absolutely confident that this team, defense or offense, has just completely turned a corner from either what you saw a month ago as the O-line or a year ago when it comes to the CB2 spot specifically. I say that, and I'm not looking past a Jabbar Muhammad versus Jeremiah Smith matchup as if, oh, well, that's just locked down. That's easy. No, like, this is going to be really, really difficult matchups. I think it's close, but I do pick Ohio State to win this one by 3. I've had it at 31-28 is where I've kind of pegged it. But no, ultimately, I think this is going to be a really close and competitive game. And in all likelihood, the first of 2 matchups in this season for these 2 teams. I'm not going to begin to project this in terms of what the matchups could be in the playoff. I have no idea. But at least for this and a potential Big Ten title game rematch, I do think these will be the 2 teams who make it because they are the 2 most talented. I just, right now, on October the 8th, for an October the 12th matchup, yeah, I do give Ohio State the edge right now.
Well, you said it might be the first of 2 or 3. If it's the third, it might be here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
The national championship game.
Yeah.
And if Oregon plays somewhere in the Southeast, I get to see you too, which I'm excited about. James,
always
appreciate
a fun part of it. Yes. I appreciate you as always, Barrett. Thanks so much for having me.
Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, we have got a deal from you from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check live stats, play-by-play, all of that right there on the same page that you bet on. It's all right there for you. You'll get started, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. They'll give you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 wager. That's crazy. You bet $5, they give you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com right now. Actually, not right now. Wait till after the show. Do it after the show. Not right now. Okay. Hey, remember, we have the subtext group, guys. So join the subtext group. You can text me immediately. You can text me with all your questions. I can text you. I'll tell you all kinds of stuff about not just what's going on in my world, what I'm watching at any given time, or family stuff. Just tell you what's going on in my world. Free for a month. Just use promo code COLLEGE. Okay, it's Q&A time. Eubank Honker, fantastic X name, asked me, where will Deion be coaching next season? I've thought a lot about this, and my opinion might change 5 times between now and coaching silly season. I've landed on right now that he will not be at Colorado. They've gotten better. There has been a market improvement. But to me, it feels like he'll want to go follow Shedeur and Travis Hunter and Shiloh. To me, it feels like he's all about getting those people bigger, better jobs, bigger, better deals. And that includes the NFL. I'm not saying he goes to the NFL, but I say he will leave Colorado and go help them in some way, shape, or form. I don't know, again, what that means, but I would be surprised right now if he's at Colorado. Because, look, this year, this might be the best year that he ever has. He's got an All-American quarterback. He's got, I think, the Heisman front runner in Travis Hunter. He's got a great receiver in Horn. He's got 3 really good pieces, but that's kind of it. Is that going to change in the offseason? Is he suddenly going to find 3 superstars in the transfer portal that want to come play after those dudes leave? No, I don't think so. That's just, to me, that doesn't seem like it's part of his goal. So I would be surprised if it's Colorado. I don't think he'll get a higher job. I don't think like Florida's going to come open and he'll be pursued by Florida. Somebody else comes open that's a Power 4 job. I don't think any of that's going to happen. I think if he's a head coach in Power 4, it's at Colorado. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to find a way to be involved in his kids' future, both of them, and Travis's future. Maybe that's as an agent. I don't know. But no, I don't think that he coaches at Colorado next season. Brian on YouTube, is Georgia out of control? And I wrote this on Outkick yesterday. And yes, Georgia is out of control. Look, the arrest of Colby Young, the details in the arrest report, they're not great. It's more a compounding view of things, right? Whether it's a misdemeanor, whether it's a citation for reckless driving, whether it's underage drinking or driving without a license, or the other extreme with what we saw with the crash that killed Devin Willock and Chandler LaCroix, stuff keeps happening at Georgia. And you look at where Kirby is, 7 arrests this year, this calendar year, over 25 driving-related incidents since that fatal, tragic crash. Kirby said this summer that they have done their best to educate these players, that they have one of the best education systems in terms of how to act like a mature adult in the country. Well, clearly that's not true. And part of a coach's job, and coaches say this all the time, is to get individuals prepared for life, get players prepared for life, whether it be as a professional player or in coaching or just whatever, right? These are impressionable young men. They're not kids. They're impressionable young men. And when you see everybody around you making stupid decisions, you're probably going to make some stupid decisions too. Not all of them, but a lot of them will. And so the education part of this for Kirby Smart and for the University of Georgia is not working. We heard during media days that he started to fine players for traffic-related incidents. Okay, that's fine. Do something different. Cool. Totally okay with that. But there's a culture problem, and it needs to be addressed. And for Georgia on the field, it might start to take its toll, because if parents start to see all these kids get arrested, it's big things, little things, middle of the road things, hell-raising college student things, whatever, they're going to have questions. They're going to wonder, hey, you know what? Is this the right place for my child? So, yes, something needs to be done from a program perspective in terms of sustaining a viable program at the highest level, and from a personal perspective. These are individuals that you're preparing for life. You're not doing a very good job of it. You're not creating a culture that is conducive to players throughout the roster making smart decisions. And if your peers are not making smart decisions, you're more likely to do the same. It's like in high school. If you're hanging around a crew and you're a junior in high school and they're like, hey, grab this beer. No. Next weekend, hey, you want a Budweiser? Nah. Next weekend, hey, you want this Bud Light? Nah. Later that semester, you want this PBR? Yeah, sure. Have a drink. It happens. It happens. So yes, this has to get fixed. It has to get fixed. And yes, there is a culture problem at Georgia. Doesn't mean it's a huge culture problem, but Urban Meyer had 31 players arrested during his time at Florida from 2005 to 2010. That's the territory Kirby's in right now. So yes, it has to be fixed. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap up the show. It's college football smothered and covered. And of course, we are powered by Locked On. Today's show brought to you by Game Time. There's so many ways to save money on tickets. No matter where you buy, Game Time Picks shows you only the best values on tickets, last minute deals on tickets right up to the start of the event or even an hour after it starts. Exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Zone deals where you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for the best seats that you can find. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, that'll wrap it up for this edition. Really appreciate James Crepea joining us from the Oregonian, talking a little bit about this weekend's matchup from the Oregon perspective as they take on the big bad Buckeyes in Outson Stadium this weekend. The biggest game of the season, yes, in terms of rankings, it is the biggest game of the season. So excited to see what happens out there in the Pacific Northwest. Hey, don't forget, join the subtext group, become a college football smothered and covered insider. The link is right there below, whether you're on YouTube or Apple or Spotify. It's all right there. You can take it. You can check it out. It's all right there. Don't forget to check out Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin does a great job getting you ready for everything going on in the college football world. And there's a lot of it on the field and off. Don't forget that notification bell. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast, wherever you watch on YouTube. We'll be back on Thursday. Until then, have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.